The next question I'll ask to the atheist is, how did our universe come into existence? The atheist will say that initially there was one primary nebula. Our whole universe was one primary nebula. Then there was a secondary separation. There was the Big Bang, which gave rise to galaxies, the stars, the planets, the sun, the moon, and the earth on which we live. When you ask this atheist, that when did you come to know about this? So he will tell you, this was first told and discovered by a couple of scientists in the early part of 1970s, for which they got the Nobel Prize. About 40 years back, there were a group of scientists who told the world how did the universe come into existence, and they called it the Big Bang. I will tell the atheist, what you say you have come to know 40 years back, and what you call the Big Bang, is already mentioned in the book which I read, the glorious Quran. It's mentioned 1400 years ago in Surah Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 30, which says, Avalam yaral lazina kafaru. Do not the unbelievers see, Anna samawati wal arda, kanat ratkan fataqnahuma, that the heaven and the earth were joined together and we clove them asunder. What you're talking about, the Big Bang, the creation of the universe, which you came to know 40 years back, is already mentioned in this book, the glorious Quran, 1400 years ago. Who could have mentioned that in the Quran? So the atheist will say, maybe someone wrote, maybe it's a fluke, maybe it's a guesswork. No problem. Don't argue with him. Continue. You ask the atheist that the light of the moon, is it its own light or is it reflected light? So the atheist will tell you that previously we human beings thought the light of the moon was its own light. Recently, 200 years back, 300 years back, we came to know that the light of the moon is not its own light, but it's a reflected light. I will tell him that what you came to know recently, 200, 300 years back, is already mentioned in the Quran 1400 years ago. The Quran says in Surah Furqan, chapter number 25, verse number 61, that blessed is he who has made the constellations in the sky, placed therein sun having its own light, and the moon having reflected or borrowed light. The Quran refers to the sun as Shams, and his light is always described as Siraj, Wahaj or Diya, meaning a blazing torch, a lamp or a shining glory. And the sun is referred in the Quran as Qamar, and its light is always described as Munir or Nur, meaning borrowed light or reflected light. And this message, besides Surah Furqan, chapter 25, verse number 61, is also mentioned in Surah Yunus, chapter number 10, verse number 5, as well as Surah Nahl, chapter number 16, verse 15, and in Surah Nuh, chapter 71, verse number 14 and 15, that the light of the moon is a borrowed light or reflected light. Who could have mentioned in the Quran 1400 years ago that the light of the moon is not its own light, but it's a reflected or borrowed light? So the atheist will give a pause, but may say, maybe, your Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, maybe you're super intelligent. Don't argue.